Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 3 of my travelogue through the United Kingdoms and Europe. Today, we are in Ireland. Ireland, like I said, a little different. And one of the things I thought was very, very cool about Ireland, of course, was that even though it's right there with all these other islands and countries, it had a very, very distinctive vibe to it. And I will not say which one of the places that was my favorite of all the ones I visited, but I will say that some of the most incredible experiences I had on my entire trip took place in Ireland. So I'll kind of let you use your imagination as far as that goes. So anyway, let's talk about this. So the trip to Ireland was pretty straightforward. Like I said, we basically went around the southern coast of England there, past the Isle of Wight, where, of course, there's this thing called Gatcombe County. It's where my family was from. I did not get to see that, which was disappointing. It's just, you're not going to get to see everything. You know how it goes, kind of a thing like that. But of course, we arrived in Ireland early the next day. We were given an amazing visual treat, which is the coasts. One of the things they always talk about with Ireland is the concept of, it's, this is a wonderfully green thing. They've got this emerald green, they've got the Kelly green. Green is definitely their vibe that they're getting when you first think about Ireland here. And I'm like, oh, cool, kind of a thing like that. So, of course, me sitting up on the ship, I get out my camera and start taking pictures of things. And this is what I'm treated to. Basically, these beautiful cliffs. Again, much better weather than we had the previous day. It wasn't nearly as rainy, kind of a thing like that. The tender ride, by the way, was awful. Not as bad as you'll see elsewhere. But you could just take a look at how green it really, really is. And again, I love this cliff line here. And you always see those stereotypical movies of like the person in that wool jacket kind of like walking down this little line here. Or like maybe you see the opening scene of the new Dune movie or something, a little like the cemetery kind of a thing like that. And they're just kind of like walking down into this big coast with the waves crashing against it and everything like that. But that's the reality. That's what these people basically do on a daily basis. I actually got one more snap here, kind of a thing like that. I kind of taking a picture of that, just basically up from the ship. But as you can see over here in Flight Sim, by the way, Diamond 40 today. I wanted a nice, appropriate aircraft with, again, great visibility. The Diamond 40, oh my goodness, what an amazing plane. Yes, I know it's not Irish, but it is definitely a great airplane for the purposes of sightseeing. It's also pretty quick, so it makes it pretty easy. So things were different, when I had basically been in Ireland. I'm sorry, when I've been in the United Kingdom. We've got another quick snap here, just kind of give you an idea of just sort of the detail of kind of the cliffs here as we're kind of sneaking along here, sort of a thing like that. And I have a couple other ones that I'll show you kind of in a minute. Oh, here we go. This is better. This is just like I said, just kind of take a look at that. But the little journey that we took on this one, we basically arrived in Waterford, was Cove, which was the place we're actually going to go towards that. We basically stopped over at a genuine Irish pub that had been in the family for like 6 or 8 generations or something like that. Of course, you go to an Irish pub, they offer you certain types of beverages, which I don't know. Not a big, I'm not going to say a lot of things that I could be quoted on later on. Again, I'm a semi-public official, you get the gist. But I think you can imagine the kind of the thing is that they sort of specialize. And it's not normally something I consume, but I thought it was pretty amazing. Here we are. So you can actually take a look at the cliff sides and kind of get sort of a feel for it. And it just sort of looked like this. But after we did that, of course, we stopped by, basically ripped through Waterford real quick. Then, of course, we came down here to the Copper Coast. And the Copper Coast, of course, is this amazing area where they had a lot of copper mines along the edges here. And one of the things is I was kind of commenting in the previous video about, kind of like, when you think of like the stereotypes, it's, basically getting a caravan and doing some basically cross-country journeying and seeing things. Nope, that's real. It's everywhere. Everybody's got their caravans or their campers, if you want to kind of think about it, kind of a thing. A little different than the U.S. In the U.S., you get like these big Winnebagos or something like that. They don't do that because the roads are way too small to pull something like that off. And it's actually kind of neat because I recognize that little island outcropping right here. And again, so what we did is after stopping by the pub, I can't say pub without saying pub, but we basically went along the Copper Coast here, which was wild. Got some beautiful looks here, and you can see kind of there's the ripples, and you'd have everybody in their little boat, and they were telling us about so much of, I guess you want to call it folklore, if that makes sense, kind of a thing like that. And there was quite a bit of it. And again, I'll go ahead and steal this one real quick, just getting an idea of kind of like where things were. But they're talking about things like, the fairies and like the fairy trees and all those other kind of things that go along with it. And I just thought that was like the most fascinating thing because, when you think of like the stereotypical Irish, you think of leprechauns, and we were having a whole conversation basically about that and the fact that, that's kind of an American marketing invention kind of thing like that, which I just thought was like, Yeah, that's like most things. And then that came up later on with the Scottish kilts, of course, which I thought was pretty amusing. But it's just sort of one of those things, Like I said, drove along this, and I've got to say, these are really sketchy roads. This is coming from somebody who's been to Italy with the Amalfi Coast. The Amalfi Coast still wins as far as why. Why did you try to put housing and like roads and stuff here, kind of a thing like that? They win. They win. But these roads were incredibly sketchy. One of the things that I'll say to that effect as well is basically what would happen is you get these roads with hedgerows on both sides, and you're not allowed to cut the hedgerows except for certain times of year because, again, you'll disturb the wildlife and the fairies, kind of a thing like that. So as a result, they get kind of big and bushy this time of year. So it kind of shrinks the road, and it shrinks the road, and it shrinks the road, and it shrinks the road, and you're sitting there in a fairly organic coach in our particular case, basically ripping down the road. And of course, a farm vehicle comes the other way, loaded with more hay than you've ever seen carried by one farm vehicle before. And you basically have to socially negotiate how to get through that section of the road. And of course, there are people behind you, there might be people behind them. And of course, then a lorry comes ripping around the corner, and then the problem gets so much worse. And basically, you're all sitting there kind of waving at each other, trying to be polite and stuff. And you have to back up, and then you have to pull to the side, and you have to wedge yourself into the tree. Then they have to get around you. Then you have to pull up so they can get around the rest of you. It's just like, oh, goodness. And then some of the roads, you go down, they get progressively narrower. And next thing you know, you realize it's a one-way road. And they actually, when we get to Scotland later on in the video, they have turnoffs where you're supposed to basically take turns getting out of the way of oncoming traffic. And it's interesting, I guess. But like I said, it's just nothing like us. And again, what I was saying in the previous video about kind of the American car, I said car, sorry about that. Car culture. There we go. I can speak English. Again, everybody speaks English. It's trying to be nice about it, polite, and not impose or make assumptions. That gets challenging. But our car culture is very, very different. So we need wider roads and stuff like that. It's just kind of amusing in its own kind of way, sort of a thing, just the way that all kind of shakes up. But we continued along the Copper Coast here, and like I said, beautiful area, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of cows. And we had a really funny thing where basically on these like small roads, we basically got stuck because, like I said, oncoming farm equipment. This is when they're doing the harvest of the hay and the straw. But what happened is, of course, every cow like in a farm that we were next to ran over basically where the electric fence was, just basically stared at us. And like, of course, tourists be tourists, and they're all looking at there going, oh, ah, ooh, kind of a thing like that. The cows are just like, that's a strange looking cow. I want to investigate that, kind of a thing like that. But that was kind of interesting as far as that goes. And again, that was absolutely wild. I actually have cell phone footage. I did a time-lapse video, basically sticking it out the window and kind of getting a feel for it. But so the first real stop here was Kinsale. And of course, there was the castle that actually we're sneaking up on right now, and kind of a piece like that. So looking down here, you can see what looks like an industrial building. It's not. It's a castle ruin. It kind of looks like that. But the cool thing here, of course, is this is one of the many, 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 many castles. And of course, this is one of those sketchy roads that we kind of saw. But let me kind of pull this way, and oh, there it is. There's, of course, the lovely town here. And this particular region, of course, very, very well known for its wool. So basically all the different shops in town. There's like really cool, like, bookstore that was also a bar, kind of a thing like that. And again, where I live in New England, the rules on alcohol consumption where you can sell it are very, very strict. So like, going to a drugstore and being able to buy a beer, like, what? Or going to the gift shop and there's whiskey? What? You have no idea how much that blows my mind. Like, that was a surprise. But the cool thing here, of course, is this was a Viking town. One of the things we got to see, and we'll be able to fly right over the top of it. If I can manage here. There's, of course, the coach park and the bathroom. Don't lose the bathroom. Basically, right there, what I just overflew was where they had the original Viking, where they'd actually tie off their longboats, kind of a thing like that. And we got to see that, and of course, they reclaimed so much of that land because they needed more room for the people, basically, kind of a thing like that. The other thing I found really interesting about Kinsale here is we're kind of ripping around here and scaring the crap out of my passenger. Hey, how you doing? Cheeky. She doesn't have the oxygen mask this time, so it's not as cheeky. But the cost of the houses here is insane. So like, I was mentioning in the previous video how there's a big housing shortage. And again, you don't get big developments like we have here. You get all these much, much older houses. But the houses will go for like, 750,000 euro each to start. And that's What? Like that? You can't live here. I should say some people can live here, but you and I, well, actually, what am I saying? I should never judge. Many normal folks who make normal median incomes are certainly never going to be able to afford to live anywhere near here. And again, one of the things we did get to see is they were doing a couple little of these new developments. But by new developments, they were basically, I think they call them social housing or something along those lines. It kind of had its own sort of vibe as far as that goes. And here's just another example kind of a Kinsale here, just to kind of get a feel for it. And again, the weather where you turn your head, it would be sunny, and then 10 minutes later you have to get your umbrella out. That was the entire trip. So of course, we do at our countryside, Kinsale, all those beautiful places. But there was one spot that came recommended by one of our friends. It says, there's this thing. It's another one of those ancient stone structures that happens to be very, very famous in the particular region we are. And that, of course, is Castle Blarney. And if you look right there, if you take a really close look, there's a giant photograph of it that I took when we were there. Again, there's the weather being the weather, kind of a thing like that. But the wild thing here was, of course, the castle was so big. Like, we'd come from Leeds, and Leeds is a pretty big castle, kind of a thing like that. But taking a look at this thing and just getting a feel for it. And again, I got everybody's favorite perspective. There's the Blarney Stone itself, by the way, if you're curious. There's a little bar here. You actually lay down and kiss this thing upside down. They clean it. Don't worry. For those of you who are brave enough to actually try it. But another thing I was really impressed with the Blarney Stone and Castle Blarney here was the fact that this is a park again. Just like with Leeds, you could basically kind of cruise around, like walking around, exploring and everything like that. And this is actually the house. This is the castle. There's the castle. Castle's right there. The house is right there. I got a picture of that one in a few seconds. Yeah, it's not so busy today. I think the line's kind of short. It was like a 90-minute wait to kiss that stone, by the way. And there's also this really cool poison garden, like right next to it. You actually can see the battlements okay. There it is. Hey, there's a camper. Called it. But the crazy thing here is, like I said, it's another very, very neat garden. And they have this little wooded area, and there's the witch's stone, and there's this staircase. And if you close your eyes and you walk down it backwards, it gives you favor and all these other really. I don't want to say touristy, but the word that comes to mind is kitschy. And there, of course, is the little carriage house there. But one of the things you'll notice here is I'm ripping around the Blarney Castle, which again, like I said, had to see it. I love the poison garden. There's this house here. Let me talk about this house for a second here. This is what the house looks like when we were there. Again, there's the beautiful skies. And my wife and I refused to go in this house because we convinced that it's haunted and we didn't want to bring anything back with us. When I write, stories and stuff like that, they always take place in houses like this. So we couldn't do it. We couldn't go inside because, like I said, we were chickens, like I said, for that particular purpose. And again, you just get a nice little bit of a color there, kind of a thing like that. But the whole grounds were incredible. The castle was incredible. The building was incredible. It was so neat to be able to actually see that. The other thing too, and unfortunately I do not have a picture of this, otherwise I would share this with you, is they had this really neat store. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Basically that building right there. And it was called a wool mill. And this is something that you saw a lot of. Also look at how busy. This is Cork, basically. Just over that way. Very, very busy shop kind of a thing like that. But we saw these in other places like Scotland and stuff like that. And we went through and they had wool everything. I say that, ironically, you can make whatever you want to make out of wool kind of a thing. Also, look at this. I'm getting 1,300 feet per minute up and I'm doing 124 knots. This is plain amazing. But it just kind of gives you an idea of just difference. It's kind of like a mill shop. And we have that kind of thing too where I live. But of course, our journey here, we were not done with Ireland. And again, like I said, we spent a total of just in Ireland proper. We also have Northern Ireland, but that's another video kind of a thing like that. But we spent 2 days in Ireland proper here. So we got, like I said, I'm kind of mixing and matching sort of some of the different things that we did here, just so you get kind of a feel for it. But one of the things we got to see, of course, was Cork proper. And let me go ahead and pull the throttle back here. We're doing 150 downhill. I think that's enough. But the neat thing here was we got to go to a really, really nice hotel. They gave us basically for lunch. One of the fun things is if you go on a cruise and they feed you lunch, it will be chicken. We only got chicken. The interesting thing, of course, is each place had its own kind of variation on the theme. Of course, over here, when we had this, they're like, oh, would you like a pint of kind of a thing like that? Lemonade. It's going to have bubbles. Warning. Just like I joked about earlier. But the crazy thing here, of course, is they have Beamish versus Guinness. And I won't say which one's better, but I kind of like the one that begins with B a little more. But I know that's scandalous. I know that's scandalous, and I will never admit to, like I said, consumption. Because I'm a semi-public figure. I don't want people to get confused there. But one of the cool things here, of course, is as we're coming through, and like I said, I don't think I have any pictures of like kind of the countryside here. This was like the most city that we'd seen so far. And, like it was big buildings, it was pharmaceutical companies, it was like all this different industry all kind of broken down. We actually saw traffic, not the variety of like the tractor going the wrong direction kind of a thing. Like that was really, really fun. But we got this great kind of downtown experience, got to see like, we saw something that we thought was a mall for a second. But one of the cool parts here, and this is kind of neat, is when you go south and east of Cork, where the ship was basically parked, kind of a thing like that, you have basically Cove, and Cobh, obviously, but it's going to be pronounced a little bit differently. But the crazy thing is they're not big on bridges. So getting around, you basically had to go all the way down to the end, kind of go around. And that seems to be a general theme. One of the things I was commenting on in the previous video, and I will comment on this several times throughout my journeys here in the United Kingdom, was the fact that they really like to not mess with what it already looks like. That is a theme that Europe is, again, like my experiences, it could be different in different parts of Europe, obviously. But it's just an ongoing theme. They have the green belt and everything is very, very well protected. You're not supposed to mess with this. You're not supposed to mess with that. You can't build anything new. There's very strict zoning and everything like that. So as a result, you basically create it's almost like a perpetual look. It's always going to look like that. And I know that that's just something that's different because, like I said, where I live, they'll knock it all down, start over. That's just, how they're going to do it. And it's just, they lose something when they do that. But as a result, like I said, that does affect, kind of your ability to kind of get around this different place. So off my 12 o'clock here, of course, is I'm just kind of cruising around little islands over here on my left. Like I said, a bunch of big pharmaceutical companies and stuff like that, basically hanging out. But there's this really cool little island here, and I'm sneaking up on it. And this is Cobh. This is the Rebel Island. I said Cobh. Cobh, which is Cove. Like I said, my Gaelic and my Irish, again, different things. They're not the same. I got a nice little education on languages, which I like it. Every time I learn something new, I feel like I'm one smarter kind of a thing. But one of the cool things here, too, was the way, this is a little rebel district, so to speak. And, it had this, really, really neat island, which I don't know if we're going to quite hit. Yeah, we're going to hit it, kind of a thing like that. This, by the way, would be the train line, basically, if you want to know what that little tiny, string of things is. And the tides here are really, really funky, by the way. But, you have this big, great island. And this is, like I told you, Cove proper, kind of a thing like that. And there's, this random zoo. Let me see if I can take a look at this. I didn't get to see this from the ground. We basically drove by it, kind of a thing like that. But right off, it's going to be right in here. There's basically a really, really cool, nature preserve. And this is basically somebody's house. And it had an incredibly sketchy drive around it. And you can actually take a look right there. You can see the little tiny bridge. And, there's the castle. See the castle? Private residence. And the cool thing is they basically threw all sorts of different symbols of Ireland on the top of it. And it's just, cool. But you can take a look on the right there on my screen there. So I'm kind of zooming in. Basically, somebody owns all that. And then, of course, we have the little road that kind of goes through. But it kind of gives you an idea of sort of what you have to get through to get there. And then, of course, Cove proper is basically south here. And I'll go ahead and swing around this way. We could take a look at that. I didn't get to see this side of things. We basically kept to the coast where the scenery is, so to speak. But again, everything here is so scenic. And like I said, they went out of their way to make things basically to preserve them. And I think that's absolutely awesome. I'm not going to comment one way or the other, but that's just kind of how they do it. But the cool thing is, if you look really carefully, ta-da! Recognize that? Because there it is right there. Like I said, Flight Sim absolutely did a nice job capturing a lot of these elements, and I think it's actually pretty cool. I actually have a better picture of that. And you can see here, Cove Harbor, basically, kind of all the different houses with their painted faces, and incredibly expensive place to live. Again, just like you saw. And there's the windmill. I don't know if I have a picture of that. I'll see if I can get you. I kind of. You can't really see it here. Like I said, I'm doing the best I can with what I have, kind of thing. But you can kind of see over there on the right that's sort of hanging out there. I'll go ahead and do my one really, really powerful 180 here. By the way, that's a naval base, and I just love flying over naval bases. But again, this whole the ship. I wonder if that's the ship. I don't think it's the ship. But there's a big naval base right there. And again, you can imagine here, Ireland, of course, was neutral during World War II. But it doesn't mean they didn't. I'm not going to say cheat, but they were biased. I don't think it's a bad thing. And again, here's another look kind of that very, very large cathedral there. Things you can see from the ship, so to speak. And I didn't take any pictures of the naval island, and I didn't want to get judged for that kind of thing. But it was kind of neat because there was actually like a little patrol vessel coming in and out. And again, they don't have police safeguard, which I thought was pretty cool. Again, there's already a cruise ship here. So that's actually where we parked. That is definitely not it. I don't actually recognize it. It's only a single piper there, so I'm not sure who that would be. Princess something or other. But you can also see, kind of the Cove and all these other things. And it was nice because you could come right up alongside here and park. You didn't have to tender anything obnoxious. And the train is right there, which makes it, again, so easy to get around. And that's going to be an ongoing theme here. That even though it's tough to drive around, it's not hard to get around. So, like I said, my experience in 2 days in Ireland were excellent. Like I said, I saw lots of really things. Beautiful country. The fairy tree thing, that'll stick with me forever, basically. I just thought that was great. The people there were very nice. The incredible thing is, we always make fun of the Irish accent on St. Patrick's Day in the United States, which is kind of doesn't, there's other things that go with it. It's, that's just people making fun of people, kind of a thing like that. Don't need to, but the incredible thing was the variety of dialects that we encountered, even in a small region. And again, some people like very, very straightforward. Other people, you'd be like, say that again, kind of a thing. But it was so fascinating. One thing I did forget to mention, but I probably hinted about when we were in Ireland, was the fact that the road signs or any official sign is in 2 different languages. It will be in both English as well as in Irish, which I think is just awesome. One of the things is in the United States, of course, is we don't have an official language. When people say, what's the official language of the U.S., it's a trick question. There is none. But obviously, we use English as a kind of a general kind of common case right there like that. And of course, that works well. And there's many regions in the United States that are actually predominantly Spanish speaking. So you'll see a lot of official documents with both. When you go to Canada, of course, you've got the French and English as the official languages. So you see a lot of things that are also in both for them as well. So it's just really cool because when we get to Wales, you see the same signs. When you get to Scotland, you also got to see those signs where they're basically duolingual. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. Another thing I thought was really cool when we were in Ireland again, there's Cork basically on my left there, flying right over downtown here. Another thing I thought was very, very wild here was, again, in the United States, different political views, X, Y, Z, kind of a thing like that. Things like climate change and stuff like that. It's an existential engineering crisis, especially for the folks in the Netherlands. And over here, again, they're talking about the weather changes, now it's affecting crops, and fish was a big one that they were actually talking about. And it was just interesting. Like I said, you get a different perspective and just a different take and a different way to sort of explain things. And I just thought that was really cool. So we're going to be landing here at Cork in just a few seconds. Like I said, it's right over there. It's not too far. We did pass by this airport. And like I said, at this point in our journey, I still hadn't seen a single engine propeller plane yet. There might have been one like parked at the side of a runway or something along those lines, but there definitely was very little general aviation. I actually ended up going over to flight radar and basically poking around to try to see if anybody was like doing circuits. Again, for me, it's traffic patterns. It's circuits basically everywhere else. I'm fine with both. It works fine for me. To me, the traffic pattern is you're doing a circuit in the traffic pattern, if that makes sense. But like I said, everybody's a little different. But I actually found one person who was like basically in the middle of nowhere, 172, tooling around doing their circuits basically through the traffic pattern. One of the things my buddy, who's a pilot, a little hardcore pilot compared to myself here, he actually makes money doing it. One of the things he was saying is they have a different way of doing air traffic control as well, something called Euro control, which is a little fancy. It's a little fancy, but it's a very, very restrictive, but at the same time is it's so effective. So it creates kind of an interesting little dichotomy there. All right, let's get ourselves down in Cork here and then make it nice and soft this time. The Diamond 40, by the way, probably one of the safest airplanes I've ever encountered. I'm not really talking a lot about the airplanes with this. It's more my adventures here. But one of the things is this airplane is fabulous. I have very, very little time in them, but I was so impressed by how controllable they are, how confident they are. Their stall is fabulous. Basically, you can't stall it. You have to. The nose will drop before it starts really becoming uncontrollable. And it just was just amazing when I was, like I said, great visibility. It's so fast for the little tiny engine. Great gas mileage. Like, these are just fabulous, fabulous airplanes. Yeah, we'll come swinging in. And in case you're curious, by the way, we did fly Aer Lingus. So I guess I have to fly an Airbus A321 XLR at some point. Long journey, by the way. This is a diamond landing. If you come in 1 knot fast, you use 10,000 feet of runway. I could basically just get out and run alongside of this thing. And again, I've still got about half my stick left, so we're doing fine here. Let me actually get rid of the flaps so I can get this thing down on the ground. Look at this. Look at this. I killed the flaps, and it's still hovering. Isn't this thing weird? There we go. We're down on the ground now. Isn't that cool? Like, it just, like, infinite ground effect with this plane. It's just neat. That might be a flight sim thing. So again, I hope you enjoyed. Ireland was incredible. It's probably, we're going back. We are definitely 100% going back. We were very impressed with it. The people were great. The food that we had was excellent. It's refreshing. Is really the term I liked. And for those of you curious, comparing it with the England, they were both great. Like I said, they both really had some serious similarities. We kind of like, it was a little more low key here. That is definitely something I will say. Whether or not it's like that everywhere, again, I only saw a tiny piece of England, so I'm going to have a limited view on it, kind of a thing like that. But again, both similar kind of like landscape, similar kind of weather, just slightly more low key in Ireland kind of a thing. And of course, if you enjoy this, next time we're going to be in Northern Ireland. So hopefully we see that. Enjoy.